Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the 938 podcast, coming to you from the mission office in Springfield, Missouri. My name is Craig Stevenson, and I'm one of the associate mission directors here with the BBFI mission office. And we're excited that you're joining us today for another great episode. And we have some special guests with us today. But before we get to them, we're excited about Project 938. And this month of August, we are focusing all of our attention on Europe and the Middle East. God is doing a great work, but there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of people that need to hear about Jesus. And so throughout the course of this month, you're going to see resources come out, videos, prayer calendars, all kinds of great things that can help you focus on praying for more laborers in Europe and in the Middle East. And so with all that in mind, I want to turn our attention to our special guest for today, and we have our friends in Portugal, Dan and Rachael Smith. So Dan, Rachel, how are you guys doing today?
We're doing good, trying to keep cool.
Yeah, I imagine so. Now, I hear it's kind of warm over there.
Yeah, the weather right now is running at about 108 with a lot of forest fires and stuff. So if we hear fire trucks
Wow.
going by, we won't be surprised.
Okay, well, hey, so are there any fires close to where you guys are at?
No, probably I would say within 50, 60 kilometers, we have a few.
Okay, but nothing immediately in your
No.
area. Okay, well, we're thankful for that, but that'll be something we can pray for the country. And I got to tell you that temperature alone is just really hot. I'm not geared towards the heat like that. So, but I tell you, thank you guys for coming and joining us today on the podcast. So I don't want to steal too much time, and I don't want to steal too much of your story. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys, and I'd like for you to just tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell us how you met. What did the process look like for you to come to know that God wanted you to serve in Portugal? And then we'll just kind of use that as a springboard into more conversation about Europe and what's going on and the need for more laborers there in Europe. So,
Okay. I guess the exposure to Portugal and the desire to go as a missionary came from my home church. I grew up in Hawaii at Lanakila Baptist, and it was my first two pastors were missionaries. And so they
wow.
had gotten the church started and the school and so on. And then me and my family came to know the Lord while being there in at the church. And being in the Pacific, we saw all the missionaries coming and going to Japan and Philippines and so on. And so we were always had missionaries in front of us. And then one year I got a chance to actually go visit Portugal. I had some family members, some cousins and aunts and uncles that had gone to Portugal to work with NATO in the military. And my grandparents decided to go visit. And so they took some of the cousins with them. And so I had about the age of 14, 15, I had about 2 months living in Portugal, just outside of Lisbon. And that was kind of my first
Wow.
exposure to it. And so when I came back from that trip, it was like, we need to pray for missionaries to go to Portugal because, my aunt, they met in
Yeah.
the living room. And so that was kind of my exposure to it. And the more I really thought about it and asked the Lord, okay, what do you want me to do in life? That kept coming back. And so I pursued it. And I went to Bible college and then studied missions. And then that's where I met Rachel. And we started working together at Cherry Street. And then the one day the doors opened up for us to go to Portugal. And her parents were actually veteran missionaries of Mexico City. And
Wow.
so just in the getting to know them and them getting to know me, it all worked out to where God put us together and we ended up going to Portugal together as a team.
Wow. I got to tell you, I love the aspect of this that says you guys are both basically products of missions, right? You had missionaries that were pastoring your church there in Hawaii, and then obviously Rachel's family in Mexico. And it's great to see how God uses missionaries around the world and to see how that tradition and that legacy is continuing on even in another part of the world. And so that's really cool. So, well,
What's
Rachel, let's go to you for just a minute. Sorry, were you going to say something, Dan?
No, I was just going to say in regards to your statement and seeing the first, second, and third generation of missions, the church that actually sent the missionary to Hawaii to start the church there, that church that sent him actually supports us in Portugal. So it was really kind
Oh,
of an honor to
wow.
come back around, second generation.
Man,
And
isn't that incredible? Yeah, that is really cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. So, Rachel, let's come over to you for just a second. What was it like meeting Dan in Bible college, and then knowing that there was a future in Portugal there? Walk us through that. I talk to college students all the time that are pursuing missions, and there's some unknowns there for them in that process. So, kind of walk through what that looked like for you.
Okay. When I went to BBC from Mexico, I really went with the thought of going to study missions, and then I wanted to study nursing so that I would be prepared for whatever God had um, for my life.
Very cool.
And we actually didn't meet at BBC. We met at Cherry Street Baptist Church.
Okay.
And Dan had already graduated, but we were both there in the college class. And Dan ran around with my sister's friends and so we ended up in the same circle and got to know each other that way. But I know I wasn't saved until I was 15. And even after having heard the gospel all of my life, it was finally when I was 15 that I realized my personal need for Christ and that I needed to be saved. And it wasn't just, it's a long story, but it's of really coming to surrender in that. And in the moment that I said that I finally gave into the Lord and I said, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I don't care that they all think I'm saved. Lord, I need to get this right. And I want to surrender to you. And in that moment for me, I was already 15 and I said, Lord, whatever you want to do with my life, I just want to follow you. And so I didn't know what it would be. I didn't know if it would be missions. I really didn't feel like I should go as a single missionary to the mission field. So I didn't know what God had for me. But I think it's just such a beautiful process as you follow the Lord. And Proverbs 3:5-6, when you trust in the Lord with all your heart and you just ask him to keep clarifying, he will guide your steps. He will guide your path and just open door after door. And so it was very interesting to me to see how God brought Dan into my life and the burden that he had for Portugal, and then how that burden that he had transferred to my parents as well. And God put us together as a team. There's no question about that, to work together here in Portugal. And it's been such a blessing. We're in an area more removed from a lot of the other missionaries that are in Portugal. And so just being here together and not being here alone has been a really big blessing. And we build each other up when one of us is down. And so God just worked all of that out. And just to see God do that as we surrender to him and say, Lord, we just want to follow you. He just does those things. He opens the door and he guides.
Yes, he does. And I love that because obviously we talk to missionaries all the time, and it's the same story. I was faithfully serving, I was pursuing Christ, I was pursuing a deeper relationship with him, and I just asked him to continue to clarify, and he did that. And it's amazing how God works in our life to bring about his will and what he wants us to do. And so thank you guys for being open to listening to what God wanted for your lives and taking you to Portugal. Now, talk to me for just a second, Rachel, about the language, right? So did you know, I don't want to assume that you knew Spanish, but how was your Spanish before? And then what was it like going to Portuguese from Spanish? Obviously, those are in the same family of languages. So was it a pretty difficult process, or was it pretty simple for you?
I started learning Spanish when I was 3. So it was pretty natural for me. When we came to Portugal, in the beginning, it was really funny because it sounded to me like a gringo trying to speak Spanish. Like
That's awesome.
Trying to get it, the accent was just really, really wrong.
Yeah, that's awesome.
as my ear got accustomed to it, it really, really made a huge difference in being able to learn Portuguese, because the structure is so similar, the vocabulary is so similar, and it really, really made it an easier transition.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, of course, I grew up in Romania. My parents were missionaries in Romania. And that's another language in the Romance language category with Spanish and Portuguese. And so it's always interesting to hear people's discussions about those languages and how easy it was to go from one to the next and that kind of stuff. So, so Dan, you make it to Portugal after being in Hawaii. That's a big shift, I would say, just a little bit. But what was that process of moving to the field like for you guys? Going from where y'all had been, Mexico, Hawaii, U.S., then making it to Portugal. What was that like?
It was actually rather interesting in the sense of I left Hawaii, go to Bible college, and then being in Missouri, that was really the first time I'd ever really lived for any length of time in the continental U.S. And that was really strange because the culture in Hawaii is such a mix. You have all these different cultures that are there. They all immigrated there. You live on an island. You're somewhat isolated, and life is just completely different. But then we pretty much got to in Springfield. Was settled in. I had a job. Me and Rachel got married when I was 29, and so we were pretty settled. And then we had Bethany and our first daughter, and then everything changed. Then all of a sudden, the doors opened up, and we're heading to Portugal. And but oddly enough, getting here to Portugal, and especially out in the area where we're living, it reminds me a lot of Hawaii in the sense of it's kind of out in the countryside, in the farm area, and it's a little bit isolated, and the cultural differences, and it really kind of reminds me of Hawaii in some sense, the style
Cool.
of living. And so it's like I kind of just assumed that, well, God had arranged it and prepared the way for it. So
Hey, yeah, that's incredible, and it's cool how you go to another part of the country or another part of the world, really, and you see some similarities like that. So that's really cool. So walk me through a little bit about your family. Obviously, you mentioned Bethany, but you also have Alyssa, Annette, your three girls. So tell us a little bit about them. What are they doing now, and just kind of where are they at? And what's going on with them?
you want to do that one?
Sure. Our oldest is Bethany. She is 23 and just graduated from Liberty University with a forensic science bachelor's. And right
Awesome.
now she's looking for a job in that field, and finishing up, deciding if she wants to study beyond that or if she wants to stay with what she has. So that's what she's doing. And Alyssa is a junior. Well, she'll be a senior this year at Liberty University. She is studying teaching English as a second language with a global studies minor. And they love spending summers with their grandma in Springfield and going to Cherry Street. And so that's where they are right now. And then Annette is she'll be a senior in high school this year. And she's not really sure what she wants to do, but just trying to figure all of that out. So
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, I'll tell you what, I was at Liberty year before last for Global Focus Week and had a great time hanging out with Bethany and Alyssa. And then, like we were talking earlier before the podcast, Alyssa's going to come and help with some planning for Global Focus Week this fall when we're out there and at Liberty, and excited about that and the partnership there and getting to hang out with our MKs that are there. So, well, hey, let's transition here a little bit. Let's talk about the work. All right. So what have you guys been involved with? Talk to me a little bit about what God is doing in the ministry there, and then we'll kind of springboard from there into something else.
Yeah, we live and work near the Spanish border, so we're pretty much out into the countryside, and we're in the region called the Alentejo, and it's the city we work in is Porto Alegre, and it's the capital of the agricultural region, and so we're kind of pretty much out here. It's about an hour's drive to get to any other city that's the same size. And we've started a church where there was no other church, and it's up and running. We've had a camp that was running for the last 10, 11 years up until COVID. and
Okay.
our camp area had shut down. So we're hoping that the Lord will allow us to get that up and running again this next year.
Yeah.
And that's basically been our ministry, getting the church established, getting the youth ministry, the camp going, um, and then hoping to branch out with the church, eventually being able to reach different areas. We've
Yeah.
had some Bible studies in different areas close by, um, but it's been kind of difficult in some sense because of one, Europe is in kind of a mode of they're not really interested in religion at all, and
Yeah.
we keep telling them it's one of our people ask us all the time, say, well, what's the difference between you and my religion or Catholicism? We said, well, we're
Yeah.
not really bringing a religion. We're here to teach a relationship with Christ, what the Bible
Yeah.
teaches. And so, but the mentality of a lot of people is the sense of, I'm not really happy with my religion, so why am I looking for another one? And so it's
Wow.
been very difficult in that sense. But
Yeah.
and then as well as we raise people up within the church and we train them and so on, this area is really not known for economic advancement, and so a lot of young people head out to get jobs in different cities, and so we've actually sent off quite a few members to different churches in different areas, even other countries. Um, but it's been a blessing because it's an area that's never had a church like ours.
Wow.
So and it's 1,500-year history as far as we know.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, you talking about having those conversations about the difference between your religion and mine, and what does that look like, and your answer there about, hey, we're not really talking about religion, we're talking about a relationship with Jesus. I was in Kenya with my wife back in July, and we got to go out and visit this group of people called the Digo tribe, and less than 0.1% of the Digo tribe claims anything to do with Christianity. And so we went out and got to go and make some visits out there in the tribe, and went from kind of one cluster of homes to the next out in the bush. And one of the conversations that we had was the exact conversation that you just laid out. And it's interesting to see how that conversation is consistent across the world. It's the same in all over Europe. It's the same in Africa. It's the same really everywhere. And but the answer is still the same. It's not about religion. It's about a relationship with Jesus. And so I love the focus that you put on that. Do you find overall the people in Portugal are pretty hard to reach?
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, they're either very traditional,
Yeah.
in the sense of maybe not committed. They don't go to church. They don't go to
Yeah.
Catholic church all the time. They'll go on the holidays, but they're Catholic. And we've had camp meetings where a lot of young people, the parents will send their kids to camp. And then after camp, we'll have a meeting and we'll explain to the parents exactly what we did during camp, what we taught them.
Yeah.
And we've actually had parents get up and say, look, we love what you're doing with the kids. We love what you're teaching them. Nobody else is going to teach them these things.
Yeah.
You have to remember, to be Portuguese is to be Catholic. And
There
that's
it is.
the way it is. And so it's on a very traditional side of that they're tied to that family history and tradition. And on the
Yeah.
other side, you'll have people who they just really don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, great. Yeah, that's cool. Wonderful. I'm so glad you guys are here, this, that, and the other. Well, what about you? Totally uninterested. And so
Wow.
it's either very heavy traditionalism or they're completely apathetic.
But on either, it sounds like on either side, and you can correct me, I just want to make sure I understood you right. Either side, it's like, hey, what you're teaching is awesome. That's great. Just not for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really an interesting insight into reaching people there in Portugal. So, talk to me about how many people in Portugal claim to be believers. And I know I'm putting you on the spot with that stat. You may not have an idea, but how many people, even like in your region, how many churches are there? What does that look like?
Let's see. We've probably within our region, if you count our region as being within about an hour's drive of us, 3 or 4
Yeah.
cities that would be within an hour's drive of us. We have our church in Porto Alegre. We have another church in Chansa, which is a little bit further down the road, and then the another church just up the road near the Spanish border is another church, and so that's it.
Wow.
So you're looking, and if you look at the whole country as a whole, 80% of them will claim that they're Catholic. But when you get down to really looking at the numbers, the best that we can figure, looking at the different numbers and the stats that have been kept, you probably have less than 1% that would actually claim and use terminology
Wow.
born again.
Wow.
So they're very traditional. And then the actual, born again believers probably about less than 1%. And that's a country
Wow.
of a 10.5 million people.
Less than 1%. So I think it's safe to say there is a need for people to come to Portugal to share Christ with people.
For sure.
Yeah. Europe as
Yeah,
a whole
for
is
sure.
very difficult. And you see a lot of people come in as missionaries, and within 3 or 4 years, they're okay, it's just not happening the way we'd like it to.
Yeah.
And then they, pull out.
Mhm.
Wow. I tell you what, there's really a devoid of workers in Europe, it seems like. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm really glad that this month we are focusing on Europe and also the Middle East, because I think that could be said of that there as well. And we'll be talking about that more later this month. But when I think about Europe and I think about the need, I think about how God used Europe to get the gospel out. And now to see the condition of it, in some ways, is really sad. In some ways, it's exciting because there's a lot of opportunities, and we just want to see God send more people and call more people and see more people saved. And so, in this process, thank you for sharing your story and a little bit about what God's is doing through your lives there in Portugal. And but when you look at Europe as a whole, right, and you think about what you just said there in Portugal, do you feel like responses across the board from what you're aware of would be very similar? Just, okay, y'all are teaching some awesome things, great things. I'm sure Jesus was a good person. Maybe I'm Catholic, maybe I'm Orthodox, maybe I'm whatever. Good for you for teaching that, but really just not interested.
In a lot of sense, yeah, most of Europe is pretty much
Okay.
that way. But you're also seeing Europe as a whole, the population is beginning to move around more than they used to. And
Okay.
so even where we are out in the farm country of, the Kansas of Portugal, or Kansas, yeah, of Portugal, we're running into immigrants from all over the place.
Wow.
Within our church, we have Romanians, Chinese, we have Cubans, we have Swiss German, we have
Oh my.
and Venezuelans, North African,
Okay.
so as well as Portuguese and Brazilians. And so it's quite a mix. And the more you move around Europe, the more you'll find that a lot of the churches that
Yeah.
are growing are really, in some sense, made up of people who are not in their home area. They're not
From
in
all
their
over the world.
right. They've been transplanted, and so
Yeah.
they're a little bit more open to the gospel.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, I was in London back when we were flying through on our way to Kenya, and my wife and I got to go downtown London and do a tour, and they were talking about how much of a melting pot Europe is, and how many different people from around the world are in London specifically, but also they made mention of other parts of Europe. And so it's really interesting to see how God is bringing all these people together in a way that gives us even more opportunity to share Christ with more people around the world just by being a missionary there in Portugal or in England or in other parts of Europe. And so it's really cool to see the opportunities that are there. It's not easy, but it's something that God can do. God can still reach Europeans, Portuguese, for Him, and so we're excited about that. And so we're excited about the work you guys are involved with and doing. We're praying for you guys. Is there anything as we kind of get ready to sign off here? Anything, last comments or last thoughts that you'd like for people to know about Portugal? If you want to recruit people, now's a good time to do that. But anything else that you'd like to share with them before we get off of here today?
Just continue to pray for Portugal, pray for the missionaries that are in Europe as a whole. as we see the world moving and things changing. We're also looking down the road as probably within a generation, we'll start to see some persecution coming. And so now's the time. Now's
the time. Yeah, I love that. Now's the time. And so if you're watching today, my hope is, and our prayer is, that you are praying for more laborers around the world to go and serve as missionaries in other capacities. And we want you to know that if that's you and you're interested in pursuing a missionary journey there in Europe, because God's calling you, we are here and ready to help you get wherever it is that God has called you to. And so, again, just want to say thank you for joining us today. Dan, Rachel, thank you for joining us today and your insights and your thoughts. And we're praying for you guys. And if there's anything, obviously, we can do for you guys, then let us know. And we'd love to pray for you and be there for you as always. And then if you're watching today, visit bbfimissions.com and visit there to get more information on how you can become a missionary to Portugal or any other part of Europe, going to make a dent in the darkness for Jesus Christ. And so, hey, thanks for signing on today, and we will see you guys next time right here back from Springfield, Missouri at the BBFI Mission Office for another 938 podcast.